Bonsoir, Kiora, Magadini, Mngiliwe, Akwaba. Welcome to the African Mirror. We are continuing with the topic that we spoke about last week with our guests and siblings, Makanaka Tue and Janina Sidu. Do people out there have an excuse to say, oh, my daddy or my mommy never taught me this? Or is it something that you actually can get to find out by yourselves?
You get to find out by yourself. Like I grew up in the church as well. But the thing is, like, I also, when we were in Zimbabwe, I grew up in a Pentecostal Baptist church. Mm-hmm. And we had a tradition of, like, really reading the Bible. And so I also grew up with a father who was a very Pan-African. And so I grew up, with the ideas of decolonizing the mind, of, like, about Ubuntu and all these philosophies. Mm. And so I would ask questions based on the Bible and these Bible encyclopedias in the house. And my answers in church would get blocked out. Mm-hmm. And so I eventually left so I could find out the answers for myself. And it was when I was sitting through it and I was like, yes, I'm all for decolonizing the mind. I'm learning the language. I'm trying to learn the basic customs of how we greet each other, all of these things. But then you get to a point where you kind of hit a hilt. Mm-hmm. Because it's like spirituality is the biggest step in decolonizing. Like, before we can return and remember, mm-hmm. you have to undo everything you've been told about spirituality.
Absolutely.
From things like, if you wear too many rings, it means this. If you've got red nail polish and red lipstick, you're a prostitute. If you burn incense in the house, you're asking spirits to come. And I'm like, you don't like your house to smell nice, so you just want to sit in your own air. And I just, so it's things like that. And so it's like
Sister,
opening.
Like you're not supposed to drop the Bible on the floor. And then
no Bible on the floor. Oh my goodness, you're carrying crystals. Oh no, So it's like there's all of these things that are like incredible barriers, but at the same time you look at it and you're like, okay, you're Pan-African and you're telling me that this land was robbed from us, we must re-indigenize our minds, re-indigenize the country. But at the same time, when it comes to spirituality, we then become barbaric. So I'm like, so when does our re-indigenizing and our reclaiming and all of these things, like, what's the maximum? When really the first thing they did before they took the land was take the spirituality. So,
Yes.
Yeah. That was my journey with it.
It's just so much. Because then going back about how actually, like, we have so much. I also, I'm a Christian. I was raised in a Catholic church, and my mama would go to church, like, Monday to Sunday. And we had to do that with my mom. And we would go there even though, like, sometimes I remember, like, being so naughty and going to a club and I'm like, how am I going to get back home? Or wait, my mom is at church, let me go to church. And I go to church and I sleep in the church so that I can wake up like, hey, mommy, I came to church, so that I can. But these are like the customs and the routines that I grew up into, to the point that when I got here and I was also doing the same thing as my mom, going to church Monday to Sunday, not even having a breather. And then somehow something dawned on me, like, was like, wait, let me understand. I'm reading this book, the Bible, in the book of Job, and I'm starting thinking and questioning, and I'm like, okay, so they're saying God said, and then Job said, and then this other guy said, and like, so this is the word of God. And when you are praying, you have to pray like that. And I'm like, wait a minute, I just have a question. Did they have recording devices then? How did they know to say word by word, this is what God said? And I started like a challenging my thinking about it. But it came with a lot of guilt. Yes. A lot of guilt because it was already in me. Like the essence of it all, it was like, if you do not believe the Bible, you're going to hell. Yeah. If you criticize the Bible, you're going to hell. If you drop the Bible on the floor, you're going to hell. And it took so much for me to even see, like, okay, let's take the Bible out of it. Let's just see it as the book of wisdom. And then I can, draw some knowledge out of it to help me be the person that I'm supposed to be. When you're talking about like Christianity coming in and taking out the land and also our spirituality, it brings me to this this thing about naming, like it's not a long time ago in Burundi, like even in my family, most of my siblings, their names are all centered on God. Like, for instance, my name is Nahimana, which means it's up to God. So my siblings have names like Praise God, Pray God, God always sees me. Is it something that is also within like Makanaka or Asidu?
Asidu.
Asidu, yeah. Is that?
Asidu means warrior, but
Come on now.
I think Janina actually means God is gracious. So there you go, Mum.
God is a gracious warrior.
Bring them together.
And here I am.
You got the love and light, but
I
also the
didn't
AK-47 just in case. Just in case.
Don't play with me.
You know.
Yeah.
How about you, Makanaka?
Makanaka means beautiful, and it's used in the context of God is beautiful. And then I've got a younger brother called Munashe. And so if you put our names together, Makanaka Munashe, it means in God it is beautiful because his name means in God. But in saying that, though, going back to Christianity, then renaming it again, there's nothing wrong with the Bible, like you're saying, it's a book of wisdom, and the religion itself. It's the way that it's been used. Because in Shona, like prior to us being colonized, we had Musikavanu and Mwari, and these were things that we revered using the same names that we still use now, but we're revering these elements and this creator.
Yeah.
So I would say it's like, it wasn't the renaming that changed. It's more or less of like the direction of the naming. It's like, yeah. So I think Makanaka and all of those names, Rumbidzai, my dad's name is Rakwashe, which means the will of God. All of those things have always existed, but they've just, diverted to mean to particular ideology of God.
Yes, and it's a bit like going to the name of this topic anyway, remembering and returning back, through spirituality, because when I look at my ancestors' way of naming, apparently it was more circumstantial, like what the family was going through, what the community was going through, what the weather was all like, in terms of like naming the young spirits that were coming into this world, as opposed to centering everything on God. We do also have like a region, a pre-colonial region, which focused on Kiranga, who was like a domain god, and who was seen to be like the middle person, or the liaison person between God and the people. So you're right. It's the same thing. Even when you go back, there are a little bit of differences here. The rituals that they used to do, the ceremonies that they used to do, which ended up being, like you love saying it,
the blood of Christ,
demonized in that manner. But yes, like there's like similarities between even Christianity and the old ways of our ancestors of like carrying their way in terms of like cherishing and praising the higher power.
I mean, because even look at like the book of Psalms. Psalms speaks about burnt offerings. Yes. It speaks about, burning incenses of myrrh, cassia, and what's the other one? I always forget. But it's like there's so many, like there's just so many things in the book of Psalms that's supposed to be a book of praise that literally signal to some rituals and ceremonies that are done in African traditional religions. And, so it's like, after I did like the decode process of, trying to figure out where everything went haywire, it's like now going back to the book of Psalms, seeing it completely differently and having it speak to differently. So it's like, those things are still there. They're just somewhere else.
Yes.
They're just somewhere else.
Yes, it's actually quite like when you look at the Bible as the book of wisdom, it actually tells you how to even live healthy. You take out the fast, you look at the fast for Daniel, who went for like 21 days without eating meat but just vegetables, and when they describe him after that, it's actually quite very inspiring. So when you look at it, there's like the spirit of Ubuntu in the Bible. There is everything that you will want to have to be able to actually live quite a good spiritual, life. But then, as you mentioned, it gets like, some of the leaders are like, oh yeah, no, I've seen God, I hear God, so God is telling me we should do this. They bring their own doctrines and they're like, oh yeah, if you drink, you're going to go to hell. And I'm like, but Jesus turned water into wine.
Listen,
and they was like,
you see, this party can't go on without some drinks.
Turned it into a party.
And it kind of goes back to what Janina was saying before about having to open up your mind to other things. So it's like, reading this book and understanding it like that.
Yes.
And also reading other things. You know, I've met people who haven't even read the book from start to finish, who won't even look at the book and say, okay, cool, this place says here, where on the map is it? You know what I mean? Like, to really do that digging back to see what it meant in that particular context and time. Because, again, culture isn't a static thing. It's ever evolving and moving. You know, if my great-grandmother was to see me now, she will see elements of herself that have evolved somewhere. But she's not going to see herself. So, like, why is it the same with everything else? So,
No, it is so true. It's so true. Like, I was talking to a person today, and we were just like talking about this naming of the names of like African names, and he was just relating to me that his father was quite a very committed Christian, but then he actually never left the way of his ancestors, like, you know, spiritual ways of his ancestors. And he was telling me that his dad used to call him his son. He used to call his son his dad because he believed that his dad was reincarnated into him. So I was like, what? So you will sit with your dad and he will call you dad? And I'm like, yeah. And what will you call him? And I'm like, I will call him daddy. And I'm like, okay, cool. And I'm like, that's interesting though. And that actually is why probably we are just sitting here to be able to share, because I was like, your dad must have had like a spiritual gift for him to have actually perceived that his dad, you know, came back to him through you, and he would even call you whilst you sitting with him like you are his dad, even though he was, you know, a Christian. So I believe that you're right. You know, it's nice to know the Christian way, but it's also having options like, let's dig deeper, let's understand, you know, these things, because especially for Africans in the diaspora, that they have never had that contact or that communication, you know, with Africa, motherland, you know, they could, like, it's easy for them to even never get to know. And I do believe very heavily that spirituality has something to do with self-identity, isn't it?
It really does.
Yeah.
No?
You look at me like,
Yes. Yeah, because I believe like to actually find out who you are and what your purpose is, you know, this, because I feel like you can spend a lot of time just running away because you do not know what your purpose is on this planet, and that's why you go there and you go there and you go there until the universe goes like, I'm having pity on you, let me open your eyes, are you ready to actually embrace it? And that's where you get to find out who you are, because at the same time, you know, like not being able to find yourself beautiful, for instance, you know, not being able to stand yourself is because you haven't found yourself. And I believe like spirituality has so much to do with it, because when we go back into the way, like look back into the way my ancestors, like Burundians, their hairstyle is like epic. But then I only got to find out about that when I was even here. I'm like, whoa, so the Burundian had these haircuts. Street job so beautiful, but then because we are here, all we wanted to do was to just like strengthen our hair, because we were taught that, you know, having long hair is the way to look beautiful, and you will not love yourself until you can actually be able to look that way. I mean, like for me personally, I do believe that spirituality has so much to do with self-identity. So I don't know what you think about it.
No, it fully does. I feel like listening to that, I feel like that's also why I'm so drawn to connecting with my ancestors and finding about where I'm from and finding about the rituals and traditions and even just what my grandparents looked like, or their personality, or why stories are passed down like from our families, or why so you know who you are and you know where you come from, and those are the keys to the process of finding yourself. So you need to know your roots and stuff in order to move forward, because how else do you flow, you know? You can look elsewhere and stuff, but there's always keys and where you've come from, I reckon. And culture.
Knowing where you come from actually helps you to see where you're going, isn't it?
Exactly.
Yeah. It's very important for all of us. Yes. I do understand that spirituality is such like a broad topic, and there's so much many aspects that comes under it. And in certain ways, some people, when they think of spirituality, as we're trying to express ourselves how we understand spirituality, I sometimes encounter people that automatically, when they think about spirituality, it's witchcraft.
Those African movies.
Right?
Then you turn into a dog. You're like, in what world does that happen?
Honestly, those movies were horror movies to me when I was like 5. I'd be like,
I would not even watch
scary.
them. I would not even watch them because they would scare me so much.
And that background music, it's all propaganda.
Yeah.
To cut us off,
Yes.
to cut us off from our practices and like connecting to ourselves and who we are as people. Outside of any structures or anything.
Yeah, like one pretty good question to both of you, starting with Janina, is did you even encounter any some blockage or something when you did produce that performance? Like, how was it for you? Because I can tell, but they were going to be putting up some pictures of the performance that they actually had produced last year, so that you can understand why I am very interested into knowing how that panned out for you.
yeah, there was a lot of backlash. And just to describe what I did or what we all did or partook in was just a performance activation, but it was also like ritual, and it was going back to our roots and ceremony and dance and movement, and there was also like nudity and stuff like that. So I think it was a lot for people to digest, especially within the African community in Aotearoa. And a lot of the African community is Christian and very like traditionally Christian. So I think it was very
no well perceived,
intense for people. Yeah, it was not well received, and I think it was also scary to a lot of people, which is what. There's a lot of fear surrounding witchcraft or our practices, which is a colonial thing, because it's not really something that we should be scared of. It's something that is a part of us and is a part of the world that we live in. And it's something that we're really good at because we're powerful beings, and it's something that flows through us. And I think that it's just about perception. And like we were saying outside, or like we were saying before, it's about like, it's just about your perception and how you're looking at things, and if you're coming at things from a place of fear, you need, or being triggered, you need to reflect and look at yourself as to why you're feeling those ways, and maybe there's something to sit with or a deeper thing that's coming up within you or yourself. I feel like in my journey there was so much fear leaving Christianity and going into my own flow of things. I was like, oh my God, I'm going to go to hell. I'm going to, and that was something that would keep coming up every single day. With everything that I was doing, and you just have to completely keep combating it and being like, no, I'm doing this because I'm exploring and I'm finding myself, and if this is a part of Earth, then is this not a part of God? Like, I don't know.
Where am I getting this
it's
knowledge
not just
from?
coming from Satan.
But imagine how much power we give this entity called Satan when we connect and we demonize everything to it.
Yeah.
Like, I was thinking about the other day, I was sitting there and I've been sort of like working through my apothecary and the sort of offerings I want to offer around teaching and sharing on spiritual practices. And I was like, my thing is I demystify spirits. Then I was like, there's nothing mystic to be demystified. And there's nothing wrong with mysticism. Because imagine if the first person who sat there and was like, wow, I wonder if I hit these 2 stones, fire will come out. If they had said, those are demons, we would all be sitting in the dark right now. In fact, we wouldn't even be where we are. Well, probably would because our people were navigating and whatever else. But like, imagine how many things we would have stopped ourselves had we demonized, imagination, creativity, all things that are byproducts of spirit.
Absolutely.
Yeah, but I definitely feel you about that backlash.
Yeah, like adding on a little bit about like, you know, choosing what to demonize or not, because when I reflect back on this man king that we call Kiranga in Burundi, like he will have like white chalk all over him and a little bit of painting here and there, which is something that had been chosen to be kept to this point. Like when you see us like wearing dots and all these things, it goes back to those times, but at least that is not, you know, demonized. It's actually kind of like you pick and choose what to promote that it's okay, rather than having the whole concept into it. So coming back to that spirituality equals witchcraft to other people, do you have any specific little experience that traumatized you that you want to share with us?
I think I'll bounce off what Janina was sharing around Nipadwa. So they approached me and our other sibling, Kara, to help open up the space.
Yes.
And so we didn't really ask too many questions or know what was happening, but we had the general idea and the concept around, you know, body is land and connectivity to earth. And so when we opened up the space, we sort of did this ritual through performance, which shows, you know, the deep hurting and the pillaging that happens to the earth that also happens to us as Black folk in femme presenting bodies, right? And so, you know, we covered each other in red paint, and then come to find out that people in the community were perceiving it as me and her smearing menstrual blood on each other. I mean, for starters, on a hygienic level, damn. And secondly, what that made me think is it brought me back to perceptions, and it brought me back to the thing I was saying before about a clean heart and a pure mind.
Yeah.
How do you get there unless if you're the one who has evil intentions?
There we go.
You know, so it's like whatever mirror or lens you use to look at something that somebody else puts up there, that says more about you than it says about anyone else.
Hey.
You know, and so when all that backlash was happening, I wasn't tuned too much into it because I suppose it was like our care and our spirit and our well-being was more important. But I remember saying, like, if you have been so moved by this, sit with yourself and ask what is it that's moved you. Ask questions. Let's have dialogues, because on the other hand, we can talk about how, and we can laugh about how it's demonized. But on the other hand, it's fulfilling the colonial project, because now you've cast out people from your community. You've X'd us out.
Heritage.
You don't want anything to do with us. You send rude messages. You spread awful rumors that are in fact demonstration of character, and you will go to jail.
No, hell.
No, honestly, jail and hell, because you're a liar. You know, you're a liar on every front.
Yeah.
But it's like what they then do is that, like, you've now divided and conquered. You now think that me and Janina are not worthy enough of being a part of your community because we're not morally standing okay. But what you've done is now you've isolated people. And then I go back to the word of God, and it says the fruits of the spirits are love, joy, and I'm just like, I don't see no love. I don't see any joy in what's happened. I don't see a preservation of dignity. None of it. You know, so it always becomes interesting when you look at the ways that people are being demonized. It's like it's based on lies. It's based on sins that you yourself are saying that we're doing, but you yourself are actually sinning against us by judging, by lying, by being malicious, by having no joy or love in your heart. So it just becomes like 1 + 1 is 5. You know?
Like, how did you get there, though?
Yeah. You know? And so you begin to wonder, like, what is the point? And then you go back to, like, why spirituality and everything else was used to colonize us, because it's still happening even today. People still use those same bases to demonize and to push people out of societies or of communities or of groups. And it's ridiculous.
It's ridiculous. Did you ever thought, you know, thanks Maka, did you ever thought when you were aiming and trying to produce this, curate and produce this performance that it will ever have that other, you know, those consequences coming at you like that? Or
Oh yeah, I knew. I knew. I was like, I can't, and that's why it was it was a scary thing for me to do, to put myself out there, because these are the things that I do in private, because your spirituality firstly should be something that if it's your lifestyle, it's what you do in private. It doesn't, I don't need to go and do a performance to show that I am this person. But I guess for me it was more than that. It was about sharing that and being an example for the community as well, and having the kids have something to look back at and be like, okay, I've seen that. But yeah, I think that it was definitely very scary because it's vulnerable, because you know that there's going to be backlash. Like I've said, I've received a lot of backlash just for who I am and living and breathing, walking down the street. So I think that I knew it was going to come with it, and I just thought it was just part of the job, part of the mahi, and I was like, yeah, let's do it.
And it's so interesting you say that, because on the other hand, it's like, I didn't really think too much about that. I guess you're like kind of holding space for yourself. But even when the photos came out and everything,
you're like beautiful.
We're like beautiful. Yo, shit.
Me too.
I didn't even think about it until the next morning. I wake up and someone sent me a text saying that they no longer want to work for me because I worship the devil.
So Janina is the devil,
and it's against their. And you know, and my response was okay, because I don't. You know, it's like at that point, it's not because you don't care, but then you realize what really matters, and at that point, that didn't matter. And I was surprised, because I thought it was absolutely beautiful. As a fellow African child, I was like, wow, thank you so much for doing this. You know, you're such a stunning, beautiful beam of light, and we're so honored to be in this time and space with you. So I was. And that's my problem. It's like you should know your people better.
You should get to know them better before you start speaking about them.
But then it goes back to what I was saying before in the beginning about how even things like burning incense is perceived as being bad, and that's just freshening up your air. Things like crystals or wearing stones, things that are literal. And I always come back to, if you can wear a diamond, I don't understand why you can't wear a crystal. Aren't both coming from like underneath the like what makes one different? And it all comes back to like the stories and the narratives that have been put around that thing.
The program spirituality we are born into, and that's why we are very much committed into changing that narrative. Props to you for actually being so brave,
like
and putting yourself out there. Like I mentioned before, spirituality personally, it actually reinforces your self-identity, which then later on gives you a purpose of what you supposed to mean on this planet, because we are only passing travelers. If you were to leave a heritage, might as well just, like you said, I admire you. You looked at yourself in the mirror and you were having like running away, and then you stopped, and then you looked at yourself, and then you embraced yourself, and then you practice your spirituality, and then you're like, I got so much holding on. I mean, I was talking to Maka the other day, and she was telling me, relating to me, how like she's got all this knowledge, and she felt something here, as if like there's like she needs to speak, it's and real. You know what I mean. So that I feel like this is what you went through at a point when you were like, I know who I am. I can feel like my ancestors calling to me, and I do this on a daily basis. How about I'll share with the other people? And I really applaud you, and I hope that you're gonna carry on, like educate all of us who are still babies, to lead us in that way, and everybody out there. And on that note, I want to thank you so very much for giving us your time and your energy and your knowledge and your beautiful love.
No, thank you for having us, and
thank you for creating this space.
Yeah, and for facilitating this really, really important conversation. I guess just to close, it's like that spirituality then becomes your grounding, because then spirit affirms you that no matter what you go through, I will never leave you, and I'll always be with you. You can always return back to what? To earth. It's the earth that keeps us grounded and everything, no matter what. So,
absolutely.
So thank you.
No, thank you. And I will see you for the next episode. All right. Have a good night.